Hello, this is Arcades, and welcome to a bit of a Stormworks build and rescue discussion video. So recently the devs on February 22nd, 2024, did a Q&A session about the game. So if you're seeing this in the future, and this is way past then know this is what this was about. And then you go on from there. If not, for those of me in the future who wasn't sure what they saw or did or didn't get to catch it or don't want to spend the time watching a full 2-hour video, I'm going to try to break it down into the cliff notes of what I saw. I did watch EndoSkull's posting of it. I didn't go to Geometa's. It was the first one I found. So anyways, but yeah, So if I put any timestamps in, that's what I'd be referencing, is where it was in the place on EndoSkull's video. So, yeah. So, what are we doing here? So, as I said, I watched the video. I took some cliff notes. I basically marked out each of the questions. I've skipped over some of the duplicates, where, they said, we already answered this. So, because, they skipped it. Might as well just skip it there. There's no point in just going over and say, hey, he skipped this. So if you go back and watch it, you'll be able to. I will be playing. I do have a few clips I want to show, and I will go over them some point, but yeah. Okay, so I guess now that we got that out of the way, I hope you like to watch. Hope you enjoy what you see. If you do, remember to like, subscribe, leave a comment, tell me what you think. It helps out the channel immensely, and yeah. Damn it, I'd never expect to do a book report over a video. Sheesh. Okay, let's get into this. So, I might be playing some different videos in the background when I'm doing this until the points I actually want to play specific videos. I'm not sure yet what I'm going to do, so you'll just see that if you do. Okay, so let's get started with this. So, overall, there was like 48 questions that they answered in the almost 2-hour video they did. And at first I thought they were pretty stagnant, but now that I've went through them and rewatched it and actually was making the notes on it and I had to concentrate on it, actually, I wasn't being completely fair to some of the people that made their questions. So how about we start with this? Now remember, this is what you're going to hear. I'm not going to be showing you the exact clips or that, except for like one or two. I'm going to tell you my interpretation of the question and my interpretation of the answer that I got from my perspective of hearing it. So you're not going to be seeing this unless something specific comes up, and I think you did. Now, the first question was larger vehicles, and the person referenced to vehicles in kilometers of size. I'm like, what? Kilometers? We have loading issues of like we have loading points of like 2 kilometers away from the player. That's that's 2,000 meters of a radius, 4,000 meter diameter. And they said kilometers. I don't know if they were actually, I don't know what this person was expecting with the conversation, but yeah, no, their response was that generally it was unrealistic to be able to put stuff into that size, and most of the issue is file size. The data, the amount of data from the text file that is the XML document, because it loads up. He basically saying that it loads up the entire thing. So if you've got like a massive creation that's like 100 megabytes, that thing has to load in that 100 megabytes of data to display it, and it can start to affect your PC performance. So trying to load things of that size can cause significant issues, because you're trying to have to load all that data in at once, is what he was saying. At least that was my take from what he said. This one, the next question, number 2. Too wide small tracks. Now, I believe The person was asking if they would ever add small tracks that were too wide. And I think he misunderstood what the person was asking. Because I think his definition for too wide versus the player's definition of too wide, I guess, let me actually show what I think was the issue here. Okay. Now, originally, we had this wheel. We had the first wheel, this wheel, and this wheel. They went and added this wheel. The problem is what people wanted is they wanted this wheel, but at this size. And that's what the players wanted. They want this too wide thing here. But what I think he thought the players were asking for was making one that was only 2 blocks wide instead of 2 blocks tall for the track part. So players want this, but at this radius. And I think he was thinking they wanted this at a 2 block width. And I think, so he was explaining from there that there was a camera centering issue that would come from having a block that wasn't of uneven proportions. Or if it was of even proportions, you know, like if it was only 2 blocks wide. And I believe this was a misunderstanding on both parties, because the first person didn't specifically state they wanted the small tracks with a 2 wide track. And versus, you know, instead of a 2 wide block. So, you know, I think it probably would have been better if he said if you had a track piece that was, you know, 3 by 3 by 3 instead of just the, you know, 5 by 5 by 3. I think, is that 3? Yeah, that's 3. So, you know, I think that was a communication error on between the developer and the person who was asking, because it would differ what each one calls wide. So there was that. Now you get to look at my beautiful mug again. And let's see, next we had more survival mechanics. And then he came back and said, basically it's possible, reiterates the current mechanics. So he goes over, you know, how we have the, you know, the freezing mechanics, oxygen, you know, your air bar, your health, has all that stuff. And while he likes the idea of the other mechanics, he didn't really think it was something that's really high on the list to add right now, but it's not a no. So he was thinking about it, and it was something that he thinks was a cool idea, something that he would like to see himself, but it wasn't priority, because it really wouldn't add a lot to the game at the moment. Petrol engines. Basically said this would be more of a adding an engine that uses petrol or gasoline for other people. Basically, he didn't see enough benefit to adding to the game because it's still just a fluid to make an engine go. And if the only difference between it and a diesel engine is literally the name of the fluid going in, to him that's just a cosmetic choice and not really a benefit to add to the game, just to add more complexity for cosmetic choices. So he pretty much nixed that. Multiplayer workbenches. Somebody asked if there was going to be multiplayer workbenches, and he basically said they actually did try to see if it was feasible, but the rework on the builder would be too extensive. He understands the benefits because he would get in there and see people talking. You know, he'd be on multiplayer servers and you see people talking while building, or just watching videos of people talking and building to each other, or people be talking and people would be talking to people would be talking while they're in the builder, and other people would help them build and understood the idea behind it. but it was too much of a rework to do to the game. It was too extensive of a rework to be able to get that to work in the builder. And however, he did recognize it, and he's looking to add it to not Stormworks 2. There is a little bit more about that later. Then it was asked if he was going to add fishing nets. He understands people wanted a more higher level of fishing, more of a commercial level, and he acknowledged it all the way and how these would have been cool things to add. It's high on the list and wants to do more to all, and you could tell he wanted to do more for fishing, considering the response people have given just for what he has put out. And he understands that people want more in here. Somebody asked, can you fix Steam to how it used to be? Now, he believes it is to be done, and he went into depth on how they went through the process to basically fix Steam to be how it was. And then he answered the question with something I've been trying to tell people for a long time.
We have removed the pressure value from Steam engines. The pressure value was obviously compressed gases update. The pressure value was just kind of a faked kind of number that was just calculated based on how much fluid was in there. Now we're using a different, a more physically accurate pressure value that's in the unit of atmospheres. And so the old pressure value doesn't make sense on steam engines, but they don't overpressure and explode anymore, so it really isn't a useful value anyway.
Okay, now his next question came up. Somebody asked about adding airport and pallet missions to the game, so to give them, fleshing out the idea of those. And he said he was like, yeah, he liked the idea of the missions, something similar to the cargo container missions for passengers, but he wants to focus on fleshing out the current features of the game before adding something like that. So that way it's not introducing more bugs in there. So he wants to flesh the current game out before he starts adding more stuff like that. And then he noted about how, there's currently add-ons that actually do this stuff as it is, so to take into looking at those. Someone asked, why can't we fly to the Arctic from space? He was saying you should be able to but if there's an issue where you can't, to put it on the tracker, and basically he led on from there. A bunch of the questions he actually spoke on length on, but some of them he actually was really quick on them too. To fix boilers not going above 2.5 atmosphere. I have a video for that one. Again, reiterating what I just showed a moment ago, but this is from the actual question itself.
Next question. Will you ever fix the issue with boilers not going above 2.5 ATM pressure? I'm going to say this is argumentative. I think boilers do go above 2.5 ATM pressure atmospheres. You might be referring, of course, to the pressure output. That's the old pressure value that is based on how much fluid they're in. We're actually going to remove that node because it doesn't make sense anymore. But that was the old pseudo pressure system that we were using before we actually had proper atmospheric compressed gas mechanics and compressed gas calculations. Now we've got that stuff. If you hover the fluid port on a boiler, you will see the actual values go up to potentially 60 atmospheres on the boiler.
Okay, now that he answered that, it basically, as he said, the boiler has a useless pressure stat on it. I was saying that all the way through. I was saying that once I figured out pre-Space DLC. I now have vindication. Okay. Next question. Preventing similar situation to the Space DLC. In other words, that lack of QA that obviously happened. And then he covered in detail the different methods that they use that they now have in place, so to speak, for special builds of the game that will bring back info to them, and so they can actually compare the situations such. And they've also decided they're also not going to try to boot. They're going to be more reasonable about what they try to do. They're going to give themselves more time. So this is obviously going to show that they're going to have... This part's it's like... They're going to have smaller and less frequent updates of the big stuff. And if this leads us getting better quality fixes in the game, that will be a huge boon. So, okay, next up, we have... what's next for the Lua add-on API? And he basically said that right now as it stands, he's been enjoying a lot of the player creations, and the only improvements to the Lua add-on that he's going to make, that they are intending to make, is maybe bug fixes and anything with new functions to get added. So there's nothing really specifically new that's going to be added, but they are going to look ways for supporting new functions. You've got ideas. He again said put it on the tracker, and it will, at some point, get looked over. The next question was hydrogen engines or anything that would come in use of natural gas. And he answered this in the same way he answered with the petrol/gasoline engine question. And he said, if in the end all it is basically an engine that goes burr, and the only difference is the name of the liquid that goes in, he doesn't see any meaningful addition to adding that to the game. All it is more of a cosmetic fuel choice, and really doesn't add anything overall to the game. So, yeah. So if we're still just using the same engine, but the only thing you're clicking is hydrogen, or clicking gasoline, they're not looking to add it. So, and you know what? I agree. For the most part, for everything we could do in this game, just adding an option to say, hey, it requires hydrogen fuel or gasoline, it makes sense. Then comes the one question I thought was going to get repeated a lot, but it didn't, thankfully. Probably because he was actually skipping a few behind the scenes. But that's my opinion, and a few others. But anyways, next question was, wedges, 1x3, wedges update was the actual question. But he referred to, you're talking about the 1x3 wedges or the 1x5s. And he says he didn't really want to make blocks pointier than the 1x4s. And it also had to do with the number of total blocks in the game. And he said they were like at 600 or something like that. But he does understand it, but he wants to be able to replicate. He wants to bring anything adds wants to add a lot of function to the game. Not just simply people wanting to find that one block that fits that one little spot, like the last puzzle piece. But digress, I would love to see 1x3s, personally. I think that is the one block they should add. And I got a few other blocks I would like to see added personally as well, but if they want to stick to that, that's fine. Personally, for me, that's how I see it. Now, high-res displays and high-res Lua, at least that's how I put it. Basically, they were asking about having high-res Lua dashboards and such. I believe somebody was talking from the turn of like making automotive displays. And he's basically, his expression, the dev's expression about this was basically it would add a lot more complicated issues for creators, as a lot of the displays now are already are amazing. He said, like, he was really liking what was already being made, and if they added more, then could be performance issues, not just by computer, but by the game and all the stuff, and really didn't want to push it unless he had to. So, and on top of that, he said it basically would turn users into like graphics designers or graphic programmers, and felt that was more excessive than what people need to do in this game. So I realized that, so he just said probably not going to happen, just because of complications for users and performance issues. Next one, will you change Steam exhaust back as changes in future for... Oh, sorry. This is me misreading. Will you change Steam exhaust back? And he basically said, yeah, there's changes in the future for smoke cosmetics so that it would fix things back to where with exhaust and such. He wasn't sure about what the person meant about Steam exhaust, but I'm pretty sure what the person meant is, and I've heard this before, was from boilers. The exhaust from boilers being gray instead of the black it used to be. And I'm pretty sure right now they have that set up so that only if the air gets above a certain temperature, it will get there. Because he even recognized, the dev said he recognized that that even overheating engines weren't putting out the proper smoke. Because, you know, engines that are overheating are supposed to put out black smoke. And they're not anymore. So, and I think he was confused by the question because he was thinking of steam specifically coming out of the port and it coming, you know, then that was working properly as far as he understood. But I'm pretty sure the user was actually referring to the color of the smoke coming out of the furnace being gray and not black like it used to. Okay. We'll ever get railroad blocks. I can't even read my own note here. Okay, hold on a second. Okay, hold on. Will we ever get railroad blocks for trains to put on creations so we can use them for, like, ferries and such? Was not something in the works or something they considered, but they did like the idea of mobile train tracks like turntables and such and bridges and thought the idea was cool and was thinking about it, so to speak. So who knows? Maybe that is something that would come in the future. And I like the idea. You'd be able to pull a train up to a ferry crossing. They board the ferry with your train and take it somewhere. Or just to transport it in general. So yeah, that would be cool. Improve steam pistons and physics. And he basically said they should be working as they were in there. They had went through a whole bunch of tests to make sure the pistons, different assemblies and such, I believe they said they took creations, but they did take a number of piston setups and tested them out to get them to work. And basically, as far as I could tell, it was working as it should be, as it was beforehand. He went over explaining how it should be working as well, the method of how it works, and I don't know. Yeah, the pistons were always kind of intermittent with their operation, and I always felt that like using a secondary device like the steam turbines to help smooth out their operation was always best. Okay, next one. If they were aware of the JSI fishing add-on, he said basically he was like, if that's the one that Professor Cognito showed off and such, I believe somebody else, someone else talked about in a YouTube video, then he's like, yes. If not, no. That was basically how he went. Funny. Address issues about the catalytic converter, gas, smoke, and how they look. Are they being... Oh. Again, I can't read my own damn notes. I was typing too damn fast. Are they going to address issues about the catalytic converter and gas smoke and how it looks? Yes, they said an update will be coming soon, and he talked about how the catalytic converters work, how they convert 3% of the carbon, or the CO2, once a tick. I believe is what he said. I'm not sure, but basically, it works in that manner. Next one is, can we get rotating warning lights? Wrote down, said a possibility. Didn't really expand on it too much. And this is one where I started getting a little frustrated, but, you know, I was like, asked, are you going to expand on the weapons DLC and get something like an armored block? And this one was he is a little hesitant on, but he said, as much as it would be interesting to add that at the same time, because he understands that there's the need for it within the weapons DLC content and that aspect of the game, trying to make the block so it's functional for other aspects of the game that's outside of the weapon military use is one that's hard to justify putting in just a set of those blocks. And he was even talking like, we're not talking just like a block. He was talking about, the way he made it sound like adding an armored block that was a variant of each of the other blocks. So you would have a way it sounded like an armored, 1x1 wedge, an armored 1x1 block, an armored 2x1 wedge, armored versions of each of the blocks, and to use them. And it would end up creating a large volume of blocks in the same time to be like, does this really satisfy? Like, if you're going to put in that much, you want to be able to use it everywhere. And he really at the time couldn't place what would justify putting this in for one part of the game, put all this effort to put in for one part of the game, and not without it benefiting all the other parts of the game. And I get this one. I really do. I know a lot of people, well, I'm sorry, but Weapons DLC is that, a DLC. It was an expansion to the game, not the core of the game. And unfortunately, I know there's a number of people who actually like playing that stuff. And there's other people who don't. And that's a problem, and it's a case of you're forcing people who don't to play that because people who do, I don't know. It's really weird. I get it that people want that, and it would really improve the play of the Weapons DLC stuff, but at the same time, you're throwing it in and kind of messing up. It's like, because what would those blocks be without the armor aspect, without the Weapons DLC? They'd just be regular blocks, right? So in order to put those in, you need something that's effective for all the gameplay. So I get that. It's kind of sad, but I get it. I'm pretty sure there's ways they could find in to add the armored aspect to it. But I guess they're just not able to. Okay, next question. Will you be revisiting old parts such as radars and windows, something like the Thales window mod? Things the mods are actually, that people are making out of each of the things is actually really cool, and the effort they're taking in trying to convert the stuff around is a really good idea. And some of them they were already close to putting in how they were making the stuff for the game itself. And then he said the one thing that I think a lot of people were actually really enjoyed, the idea he thought of actually putting in some sort of addressing mod support. Now, let me make this clear. This is how I'm interpreting what he said. Now, he did say he did like the idea of mods and how they're bringing more to the game. And the way he talks in the future, I do believe mods are on the table as a possibility in the future. So, at that point, that's where it's like, So, and I'll get into it later. There's a question down the road, I know, that he addresses it a bit more. Being able to cool things down to below ambient temperatures. I admit I never actually thought about that. And I know there's been a few exploits I've seen where people have gotten stuff down to the negatives, but to straight up use everything like you were supposed to, yeah, I've never seen anything get below ambient temperature, and I never even thought about it because there was no need. I mean, to be honest, there was no need. So, and he referred to it as a cryo cooler. He thought it was a good idea, and he said he wrote it down, and that's pretty much all he left to it. And then here's an interesting one. This person asked about support tickets that are flagged as LP and basically unban users, at least this is how I understood the question, unban users as LP that are not, and basically show that they're not spammers. And he explained how the support system works. That yes, people will bring this in, and he understands that people are trying to be, not everybody is trying to be this spammer and all that, but sometimes a person puts in a lot of freaking, I'm assuming like in a month, this is me just making an assumption, but like if they put in so many support tickets, like in a month on the support tracker, it blocks them with like an anti-spam priority. It doesn't like get rid of their stuff, but it puts them as low priority. And I believe this is what the person refers to. I don't actually throw a lot at the tracker. I think I've done like 3 things in the entire time I played the game. So I can't say for sure. but it sounds like he understands that this is not a perfect solution, but it does allow them to see not just one person's issue who puts like 70, 80. He said the example, there was a person that has like 70 to 80. I think he said 70 to 80, or maybe 50, 60. But either way, it was a lot of support tickets on the tracker. But then if it's just their stuff, they would have a hard time seeing like the person only puts 2 or 3, and they want to be able to see those as well. So this way, it kind of gives them windows and openings to see the people, those other people, and their issues. And while, like he said, it wasn't perfect, it's not, they don't ignore them, but at the same time, like say if there's a lot of duplicates on the issue, or they have a lot of the things, they might get hit as low priority, and apparently that's how I understood it. Because like I said, this is not something I'm familiar with, because I don't send a lot of support tickets in, so I'm not sure on this. Next question after that was be able to create sounds using Lua. I'm not completely sure what this person was meaning, and I think a part of me was also the dev wasn't sure what they were meaning. Now, was this like the add-on Lua making sounds? Like creating a sound in the game for you to hear? Was this a sound from, well, I think that's pretty much from that, like say a pop-up comes up, one of those little pop things, and be able to produce a sound? Or was it, or is he referring to Lua within, on the screen, like having the screen pop out a sound, to play a sound on the speaker or something like that? Because I know you can have the buzzer make a sound right now, but you set that. And it would be really nice to be able to have a part that, like a composite sound part that just produces sound based on the input. Maybe that was something, but yeah, straight up a Lua creating a sound using Lua. And he went around basically, I think this person also asked about turning sounds off from pumps, I believe. Or was that later? I'm not sure. Anyways, so, and he just basically said this would end up probably being in more the modding file, because the quickest way to change that would be probably just file modding. And that's where he went with that. So there was another instance of him saying modding as a possibility. And I think that's where he's going to end up going for a lot of the cosmetic stuff that people want. They're just going to probably leave it to modders to take care of that, where they're functionally the same part with just a different look. Yeah. Next one, planning a new... Oh, okay. Again, I can't read my own damn notes. Planning a new game or Stormworks 2. And he was kind of enthusiastic about it. He said, yes, we're making a new game. It's not going to be Stormworks 2. That's why it's called not Stormworks 2. And he said it was going to be fundamentally different than Stormworks, but have a lot of the same mechanics, but it was going to be a higher focus on the quality of the mechanics and on the components. So, and how they would all work together. So, and he was saying that right now, as Stormworks stands, the amount of content that game would come out with would be like maybe at best, I think he said about 1/6. I think I got lost in the math that he was going for. And basically, the content was going to be nowhere near the same. So it was just trying to follow up, using this game to follow up Stormworks as Stormworks 2 would have so much little with it. And considering the debacle that kind of came out with Kerbal and Kerbal 2, I think I can get where he's coming from with that. So instead of just making Stormworks 2, it's going to be take the same idea as a vehicle builder and similar mechanics and make a higher quality game, and making a higher focus on the quality of the components in the system. So, hey, if it comes out, comes out. That's all great. Next question was, will they be adding gas spawners? He said that is something that needs to be done. That was another short and quick one. All right, this question is, add-on GUI options. He was actually very surprised about how the multiplayer blew up. And he described his original intention for it. Now this one, I will be definitely adding a video for this one, so here it is.
We're surprised because we just never intended for multiplayer to be used, I guess, in kind of this, I'm going to describe it as this 2B, 2T style, which is kind of this Minecraft server style thing where you've kind of got, like, everyone is joining and it's kind of like an open world game. And that wasn't really our intention. I think our intention with multiplayer really was to allow players to kind of cooperate and potentially crew vehicles together, or crew a small number of vehicles together, or work together. So I think a lot of this stuff where we're talking about, hey, we need to like fix these issues related to supporting these open servers where people are joining and going off and playing on their own. Yeah, we just never imagined, and obviously it kind of makes sense. The multiplayer will be played that way, and that's how a lot of servers are wanting to run.
Okay, so as you heard in there about, he was talking about how multiplayer blew up and how it went from what they intended, and any issues they said just about the GUI options to just add to the tracker. Now, what I'm going to show here is he went off on tangent not long after that, and he talked about the sync issues that people have with multiplayer, and the reason why people will have issues with it. And frankly, this is what I've been trying to tell people a lot, is you just can't fix multiplayer so easily because there's a lot of data there, and he goes off to talk about things that what they could do and why they don't do it, and such. So here we go, second segment.
Going on to just talk about the multiplayer issue a little bit, Stormworks multiplayer is sensitive to packet loss and bandwidth throttling. So if your interconnection is poor Wi-Fi with poor signal, or mobile internet, or just has really high packet loss to the server, or you're running out of bandwidth, your multiplayer experience isn't going to be good. You can see here in this video. Oh, is it? Do I need to press restart? Doesn't seem to be playing. Weird. Okay, we're off. We seem to be working again. The multiplayer stuff is sensitive to the multiplayer, so you can see I'm playing multiplayer here. I had a great experience in this video session, playing with someone who's in another continent. We both had a great time, no problems whatsoever. Obviously, we've got quite a bit spawned in here, loads of vehicles and stuff, but there's not loads of players. There's not loads of vehicles all across the map that have just been forgotten about from 2 hours ago. But the multiplayer is working in this context with decent internet connections. If you're trying to play and you've got high packet loss, our multiplayer system kind of relies on you not having packet loss in order to be able to handle the humongous amount of bandwidth required. Even though we're doing loads of compression tricks, there's just so much data to synchronize that you're just not getting done in other games, because these vehicles are so complex. There's so many parts to them. There's so much data flowing around these vehicles. Synchronizing it is a massive challenge. We don't have the bandwidth to spend on basically like packet loss resistance netcode, because that's just going to double, triple, quadruple the amount of bandwidth, and ultimately, while we might help some players who have high packet loss because they're playing on Wi-Fi, for example, or like at the other side of the building to the router, I played this on Wi-Fi and I was absolutely happy, I was fine. But obviously, if you've got really high packet loss, and I mean really high, then it's going to cause you quality of experience issues. So please, if you are having multiplayer issues, please do have a look at your packet loss, because that might solve it.
Okay, now after he talked about all that, and I mean, so he was talking about that packet loss and how the game's acceptable to it. I mean, I hope maybe if you have issues with yours, maybe stuff he talked about could solve it, but there's certain things you just can't solve through the code of the game. And yeah, so okay, next question. Could they add incendiary warheads to the weapons DLC? I'll admit, when I first heard the person, it took me a good 10 minutes to try to figure out what this guy was saying, what he was saying, because I thought he said sentry heads. I'm like, what the hell? No, incendiary warheads. And he didn't say no, but he did write it down. He said he was going to write it down, put it on the board, and would be a small update, he said. And yeah. So, who knows? Maybe in the future we might see some napalm. Yes. Okay. Next question after that was, could there be more underwater missions and possibly, NPC submarines? And he did note that submarines weren't as popular on the workshop. And this might be just because they were... Actually, yeah, subs were not as popular on the workshop, and he even hinted at that there was more missions in general coming. He didn't know if there was more underwater content, but he did reference the fact that there was more, that they had just recently done some underwater content and such. So, and I believe he was referencing the subs because people probably weren't as popular even before the gas update because they're not exactly easy to build. So, and even thought this was talking about possibly thinking about enemy AI subs and people going along and all of a sudden they just get blown up out of nowhere. He's like, that wouldn't be fun for people. And you know what I gotta say about that? How about you nerf the goddamn jets? I hate the jets. I hate the jets. I hate the jets with a effing passion. Anyways, let's move on. Next question. Different size steer wheels and more value on the throttle lever. Now, I think this might be a question of a more inexperienced builder. I think, possibly. Because he sat there and talked about how you could adjust the values on the throttle. And then he came back again to the wheels, and I'm not even sure if the person was actually talking about a steering wheel or the steer wheels, like your wheels in general that are capable of steering. This was actually kind of like, I wasn't sure. Now, he went and took it as they were talking about the steering wheel and said that if it's just basically going to be a cosmetic change but the same function overall, yeah, then no, there's just probably leave that to mods. So that is the third time he has mentioned mods in the stream and on the video and such. So, hey, maybe he's warming up to the mods as a possibility. All right, next one. We're most of the way through them now, about 2/3 of the way through. Okay, get more in depth with modular engines with the mechanics and parts. Basically this one, he made it clear he wasn't exactly happy how the modular engines were, but at the same time, because of their use right now, any large change would mess up a lot of vehicles. And considering what we just saw with the Space LDOC, I think he's a little bit more hesitant about doing that. So a lot of people are just going, oh, it doesn't matter, they don't use the brake. Oh, trust me, I think it's not as much about what was that's not there being used anymore. It's about the ones that are currently are. And I know the frustration I went through just trying to fix my oil refinery. So, and my own truck. So, and then you go to add the modular engines to that, which are very prominent now. Oof. Now, I would say one update I would love to see them is when they originally introduced mod engines, they had that part that was both the intake of air and fuel at the same time. So it was a double manifold. I wish they would reintroduce that part. That is the one thing I really wish they would reintroduce, is that part itself. Outside of that, yeah, I believe, he did want to break creations, and he considers them kind of a black box. And changing them at this point would just not help players as a whole. So, Okay, and then this one is an excellent one. Oil, will they be adding a oil spill cleanup button? He just said yes, in the works. There we go, short and sweet. This one I believe was a whole misinterpretation by the dev, completely over, because the person wasn't clear. He asked if they were going to make changes to add suspension to the tracks. And for most of his builders, we know he probably meant to tank treads. But he took it as the train tracks. And talked about suspension on the train wheels. And whether it was needed or not. And unfortunately, I think this was messed up just by a misinterpretation of what he was meaning by tracks. So, we do this again. You go to ask a question. Be specific about the part. Oh. Alright. Next question. Any chance for various gimbal components when they talked about a gimbal radar and a gimbal pivot piece, and then a IR tracker and an optical sensor? Now, he was saying that he believed the radar should have worked as a gimbal already, but then he notices kind of just a sweep, so he put a note down about it. I know he said that, at least, and, we'll see how it goes from there. The pivot, he said, was something that wasn't native to the bullet physics engine of the game, and it was something he was going to need to develop itself. The IR tracker just referred to the infrared missile head and optical sensor. Wasn't sure on this because I don't even think he was sure what the person was asking for about the optical sensor. I think maybe the person was asking more for a missile head that just looks a proper missile head looking piece for a camera. Okay, so next question. Geomagnetic storm. Basically something that there was an effect where, I guess, either in an area or all over the map or something like that, where basically radio transmissions and electricity would just power out. And he was like, this sounds like a cool idea because it's similar to how the lightning bolts work. When they knock out all your power and such. But he's like, needs some explanation why to the players it's happening, and it would need to be developed around to make sure that the player understands what's going on, because otherwise people would just get knocked out of the sky for no damn reason. Their shit would just work and be like, the game's broke, and would just frustrate people. And oh shit, I got surprised by the goddamn tsunami that came in. Or rogue wave, I guess, at this point. Anyways. So, yeah, I think that's actually a cool idea, but I think he's completely correct. We gotta know what's going on, so we can counter it, if need be. This next one, I think, was a two-part question in one. I have it written down as two, but person said optimizations when he decides to sigh and goes, oh dear, and then why major update adds one block and questionable fixes. And I think this person was referring to how the fishing update just basically added what? We just got the vacuum piece and the fishing pole? And then just added a whole bunch of mechanics, so to speak. Because he did talk about the fishing update and why it was a smaller one, and he basically said I wasn't going to apologize for being smaller. But again, they were trying to aim for higher quality updates, so they were probably going to be smaller in the future. And this is probably a good idea considering after what happened with Space DLC. This is probably better for them to do right now until they get a little bit. Your reputation gets a look back up a little bit, which, considering the way it's been up until this point, that's going to be a little bit. Let's be honest. Everybody knows that they've been a little lacking in some of their cocky and how their stuff happens. So, but with the update, they're showing that they realize they effed up, and now they're trying to fix it by making sure we have better updates and better quality, and that's all fine. And if it comes out to be that way, so be it. I agree, though, that the fishing update was a little lacking. I thought it, yeah. Now, if they expand on it later, which they said they were, then yeah. But yeah, the updates will be and such. Then he goes back and talks about the optimizations afterwards. And it's a complicated issue, basically, is what he said. Now, sometimes some people come in with a machine with good specs and have a problem with drivers and such. As one example. And then there's other times people come in with an issue with trying to spawn a colossal vehicle and their PC just isn't made to handle it. Because even nobody's PC would handle it, even with good specs. And then then there's cases where the person's PC just doesn't even meet the minimum specs. Whether you consider that a case of them not understanding what's on the page or, something similar that's just not being communicated properly, he's not sure, but generally it falls under those categories and they do what they can. It's like if they can see what it is, they'll do it, but if there's just some things he can't control, and, in the case of trying to spawn something big, it's going to happen. A lot of physics bodies, or, their machine just can't handle it. Their machine can't handle it. All right, next question. We've been to the Arctic, desert, and space. How about the next one? We visit the deep. And yeah, here he goes off talking about how they did the underwater missions. They got the underwater caves, underwater mining. And they could be a little bit more added to it, but for the most part, they have added stuff for underwater stuff. And I think the person was referencing more deeper stuff, like Mariana. Well, maybe not Mariana's Trench stuff, but basically, to that type of stuff. But I bet in the limitation of the game on how big of a skybox, a box that can build for it can do. Next question. A weapons DLC overhaul. More range, less spread, and possibly add mortars and a grenade launcher. Now, he did admit that the weapons may be a little too spready, and they probably go back and trying to check that out, in which I say F that, except on the rotary. I think the spread is fine on every weapon except for the rotary cannon. Rotary cannon needs to be tightened up because it does too much damage just by spitting at you. That's my personal opinion. I hate the rotary. I hate it with a passion. I hate it, hate it, hate it, hate it, hate it. When the enemy AI is using it. However, as far as hand weapons, they're not looking towards making useful, powerful hand weapons because it is a vehicle builder, and they want the focus to be around the vehicles. I still think they should add a rocket launcher and a sniper rifle. They don't have to instantly kill stuff, but they give you an option to be able to take out far off targets at minimum safe distance. At least at some sort of safe distance. When you got nothing else, I would love to be able to take out the goddamn jet with a sniper rifle or rocket launcher. And it doesn't even need to be a one-shot, one-kill. I just want to be able to actually do damage to it. And that's my major issue. I just want to be able to do damage to it at a far distance. I can deal with taking my time. But, okay. Next one. Can you add more life to the world, like corals, towns, and people? And again, he references out this would be a technical issue because that would add more physics to the world and thus cause more performance issues. And he, made an example of if you go to drive through a tunnel with a vehicle, there's generally a slowdown there because you're having physics inside of a physics that's wrapped around by another set of physics and ends up causing issues. So that was his example. And so it would be a technical challenge for all of that to keep from causing performance issues. And definitely, if you've ever been a boat, getting away from shore, Makes a hell of a difference on any performance you do. Player desync in multi. Now, he said there shouldn't be any multiplayer desync for the characters, but does know of certain issues that can come up with like teleporting and such, but if he changes them around, it could cause other technical issues. So unfortunately, they're leaving some of the issues as they are, because overall I guess basically it was a case of, for him, the way he explained it, of lesser of two evils. Now, this one I thought was actually a really, really interesting question. Pretty important on both sides of this. The question was, more typable letters in chat. I want to be able to type in my language. And he was like, yeah, you should be able to. However, they had added the language modding support so that you could get your set in there. But they used one particular font set, and I believe he called it Noto. I'm guessing it was Noto font. But however, it still has limitations, because even with, he referenced to Google trying to make a universal set font using all the issues, and even they haven't got to that at this point. As covering it all takes up like gigs of data. I am very much paraphrasing this, because it was a lot of technical babble that he was speaking, but basically the idea is that in order to cover everything, you need a lot of space. And he basically said it'd be one thing to just add 5 gigs to Stormworks size just for text, is his example. I would be basically adding like 5 gigs to Stormworks just to add in font. Add in all the characters for one font. That's not a fun idea. Okay. Next one. Will there be an expansion to the weapons DLC? Even more weapons, or flex belt for weapons? Like a flexible ammo belt for weapons. He likes it, but too much work. He likes the idea of it, but he thought that adding a flexible belt would be too much of a specific feature to add to the game. But he's not saying no. But it would be such a limited feature that it's super low on the priority list. And it seems a lot of these things, basically, it boils down to a lot of the features that people are suggesting. The more specific it is, the less likely they're going to look at it. And I believe that's probably a good choice for what he's doing in this. And it's just, yeah. I mean, I don't believe it's wrong at all. It is a very, it's a good way to look at it. He didn't say no for an expansion, and he did see a lot of people wanted, that it was one of their highest, bought DLCs and such, and believes there's definitely, there's purpose for it, doing an expansion on the weapons DLC. So, hey, who knows? Maybe there'll be a second weapons DLC. This one, even I wasn't sure on what the person completely meant, except for one part of it. Signal control options, pump noises on or off. And basically said, why would we put in an option to just turn pump noises on, as it doesn't sound like a realistic option? I personally just want them to lower the volume of the pumps. They are freaking loud. I think that's what most people's problems is. They are loud. And not even from necessarily that they're... It's like, yeah, I get it. They're loud. Because me personally, I work in an airport. I fuel aircraft. Loading fuel into our fuel trucks, those things are loud. They are extremely loud. But that's at work. This is a game where we're trying to get away from it, and we want to be comfortable. So I think being able to, should turn those down. But, unfortunately for what he was saying, though, if you wanted to remove it, again, modding was an option. Basically what he said. Again, fourth time, he mentioned the word modding. So, yeah, it looks like for cosmetic stuff, he's going to they're probably going to add in support at some point. They've been talking about it. They've repeatedly mentioned it here, so. This was an odd question, too, even by mine. But it says the person wanted to be able to power steam wheels using the diesel engines. Now, I think the person was wanting, like, an adapter part that would, like, drive the steam wheels. Instead of using the steam piston, it would use the RPS from a diesel engine. I'm assuming that's what he wanted. But basically said no because they were built for steam. And this is me paraphrasing. It basically said they were built for steam, and there are wheels built for diesel engines, and the steam wheels were specifically built for their purpose. So, yeah, probably not going to see that change. And there, we are finally to the last question before end the stream, which was thoughts on texturing the ground to make it easier to see. And he was like, he understood that sometimes it can be difficult to see the road and such, and that there's a place for it, because he was on a creation and he noticed how people were like slightly discoloring other things to help make things stand out, like for the flooring and such, and helps make those things stand out much. So he was like, he understood it, but he wasn't sure on how they were going to do it and the amount of effort and the amount of work it would take to actually get that done. So, yeah. So, I'm now at over an hour on this video for the raw footage. So it'll probably come out a little shorter than that for this, but yeah. So that was a Cliff's Notes version, which involved me paraphrasing as what I understood the questions to be and what the answers to be. So if you want to see the full thing, I'm going to link Endos, and I'll link Geometas, because my timestamps, if I have any, will be off of EndoSkull's video where he did of the stream. I meant to do a stream myself of it, but I completely forgot. I was playing too much Power World. And yeah. So, yeah. I guess that's about it. I mean, I was originally, when I heard about the stream, I was a little hesitant about it because I figured it'd be a lot of the same ones. Questions that are always asked and repeatedly answered. And there was definitely a few. I knew the multiplayer one was going to come up. It's constantly answered. People think there's a magic switch to the multiplayer as a fix when it's a lot more complicated. A lot of physics, a lot of games, because you still have games like Brick Rigs, which has a lot of physics in it, but they use a completely different physics engine. You have Beam and G, which that's when that said it couldn't happen, but then somebody made it happen through a mod, turned into its own game. But even then, watching videos on that, it's still not perfect either. There's just too much stuff to just... They don't have a AAA studio behind them like GTA 5 does to fix these physics issues that come in with multiplayer, and even then, stuff still happens. You're like, what the hell? That's not what happened on my screen. I mean, you're not going to get the magic fix button to the multiplayer. That has been my one thing I've tried to talk about, and and one other thing I gotta say is, I've been saying in my streams multiple times on Twitch, vindication about the boiler pressure stat not meaning anything. Other than being a failure point. Personal vindication. Because I have a lot of people that argued with me about that. Finally, word from the horse's mouth. Alright. Hope you had a good time. Hope you enjoyed Witch Watch. You know the deal. You know the spiel. This is Arcades. Signing out. Have yourself a good day.